We're not going to have the machines over here on this side of the room and the humans on that side. This is not an alien invasion of intelligent machines.
Okay.
First of all, this is emerging from within our human-machine civilization.
Okay.
We are already today quite dependent on our computers. They're intimately integrated into our civilization. If all the computers today stopped, civilization would grind to a halt. Now you might say, well, of course that's true. We're very dependent on them. That wasn't true just 20 years ago.
That's right. That's what makes it amazing now.
So in 20 years, we have changed the nature of our civilization to be totally dependent on our machines. We can no longer pull the plug. Well, as we go forward, that connection between humans and machines is going to become even more intimate.
Right.
But we're going to be putting these computers in our brains. Within 30 years, neural implants won't be just for disabled individuals. We'll all be using them to enhance our perceptions, our cognitive abilities, our ability to be creative, our memories, really extending the range of our minds. Conversely, computers, devices built with new computing mediums that are not carbon cell based, will be built on the design of human thinking. Some will be copies of specific individuals. Some won't be copies of a specific person, but will be built based on our insight as to how intelligence works from having studied the human brain and creating those designs.
Ray Kurzweil, este senhor que ouvimos, escreveu e refletiu sobre a era das máquinas espirituais, o momento em que os computadores ultrapassam a inteligência humana. A tecnologia, o design e as ciências sociais, todas em conjunto, estão a conceber novos produtos que jamais imaginámos. E mesmo ao vê-los dar os primeiros passos, e ao contrário dos robôs da professora Manuela Veloso, muitos de nós, aposto, não deixam de se questionar sobre a utilidade, a necessidade, a razão para um dia usar ou recorrer a alguns destes produtos. 2 ou 3 exemplos daquilo que se chama a internet das coisas e que está a mobilizar milhares de empresas por todo o mundo, investigadores e gestores em inúmeros produtos, incluindo os chamados wearables, os produtos com tecnologia tão intimamente integrada que servem para mais do que vestir ou usar. Os sensores aproximam-se do corpo, em alguns casos relacionam-se eletricamente com o corpo e temos, por exemplo, um vestido que altera a sua opacidade, consoante o estado de ansiedade ou de tranquilidade de quem o veste. Ou outro que exterioriza os sentimentos através de cores. As cores têm o entendimento clássico, em que o azul é mais tranquilo, o vermelho mais eufórico ou ansioso ou de medo. A companhia que está a fazer estes produtos, a desenvolvê-los mais do que como protótipos, já a vendê-los, tem esta curiosa mensagem publicitária que é: o futuro é íntimo porque queremos estar mais próximos de nós. Mais um exemplo, um anel que serve para desbloquear portas, alarmes, telemóveis e transferir informação através de redes Wi-Fi sem precisar de ser carregado. E umas meias com sensores e integração com o telemóvel, que são de resto um sinal de como o telemóvel que transportamos no nosso bolso e os chips de saúde armazenam e recolhem cada vez mais informação íntima sobre nós. Porque as condições de saúde, o estado físico das pessoas é das dimensões mais íntimas do ser humano. E isto está a acontecer em escalas cada vez maiores. O futuro é sempre surpreendente. Li recentemente de um editor de tecnologia a ideia de que os wearables se podem traduzir por um novo conceito, que é o extimacy. Em português, qualquer coisa como a intimidade exteriorizada. Nos vestidos, nas camisas, nos cintos, nas meias, intimidade exteriorizada. Que conceito estranho. Mas talvez seja ainda mais surpreendente etiquetar o ADN das espécies vegetais no Alasca, ou tentar identificar micróbios que só existem na atmosfera terrestre. É isso que faz uma das participantes nesta sessão, que vai ser conduzida e moderada pelo Diogo Queiroz de Andrade, que é um jornalista e um estudioso há muito tempo nestas matérias, e o diretor criativo do a quem dou, do Observador, desculpa, Diogo, a quem dou a palavra a partir de agora.
Obrigado, José. Vou falar em inglês porque é a língua nativa de uma das nossas convidadas e é também a língua nativa deste tema, pelo menos por enquanto. It is going to be a fantastic conversation because our guests are extraordinary and you'll be able to see that by yourselves. I have the pleasure of having with me Ellen Jorgensen, co-founder and director of GenSpace, the first public biological facility in the world, which is a hacking lab to promote genetic knowledge. She has a PhD in molecular biology and also coordinates teams studying DNA in scientific competitions. Also have the pleasure of having Pedro Lima, professor of electrical engineering at Instituto Superior Técnico, which is also the subject of his PhD, the electrical engineering. He coordinates a scientific group of robots and intelligent systems and has a vast experience in international robotic challenges and promoting science and technology. This next hour, as the future itself, will be a wild ride. We are on the brink of a fundamental change in our civilization. We will, pretty soon, be able to tackle most problems that kill life, and we'll be able to expand our physical and mental abilities beyond our current imagination. This is not science fiction. It could be, but it is not just science fiction. This is a reality being executed right now in hundreds of public and private labs all over the world. In the center of this horizon is biotechnology, with the promises of biomedicine and cyber engineering with robots and artificial intelligence. That is why we have with us today specialists in genetic and robotics, but who are also educators. They promote knowledge and science. And I know for a fact that we need a lot more of knowledge and science. So, without further ado, Ellen, I give you the floor.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Most of our attitudes towards genetic engineering are unfortunately arrived at through the dystopic lens of Hollywood movies such as Jurassic Park. What's interesting to me as a scientist is that actually the truth, while not as dramatic, is a lot more pervasive than an isolated island. If any of you in this audience is wearing cotton, it's from a genetic engineered plant. There's virtually no cotton anymore that's not genetically engineered. And the same is true for a lot of other products that we use. Genetic engineering has been around since the 1970s. It's quietly pervaded almost every aspect of our lives. It's kind of ironic to me that people that are very scared of eating genetically engineered food will gladly go to the doctor and be injected with genetically engineered medicines, which represent most of the new breakthroughs that we're seeing today in fields like cancer research. And also, quietly, there are also many industrial processes that have been revolutionized by this. There's going to be genetically engineered products, rubber, plastic, industrial enzymes, even enzymes in food production that aren't the food themselves. For example, probably just about every cheese in the world is made with genetically modified rennet and not rennet from cow stomachs anymore. In his book, Regenesis, the Harvard professor George Church talks about a new generation of technologies that are going to speed up this process even further. One of the things that was most discussed about this book was the prospect of bringing back endangered species, including the Neanderthals. And of course, the popular press decided that that was the most important part of the book. Sorry. And so this quote from the book immediately became this: I particularly like, I just need a willing woman. My interest in this is more who gets to do it. So as a founder of the biohacker space, GenSpace, I asked the question, the general public may be more familiar with this person as the face of genetic engineering, but why not this person? In 2009, I co-founded GenSpace. It's the world's first biohacker space, and that means that anybody is welcome to come in and learn this new technology and practice it in an environment where we do stress safety, but we're not constrained with any particular goal in terms of, is it profitable, is it something that will benefit mankind, or are you just doing it for your own amusement? We don't care as long as it's within safety guidelines. And we strongly believe that this is an opportunity for experimentation and innovation in a space that's never really existed before, because it has no single purpose. It has whatever purpose that the user wants to put into it. The movement was founded by people that were very idealistic. And one of their goals was to further public understanding of the technology. And as a working scientist, that's what attracted me to this in the beginning, because I felt that if people didn't understand what I was doing, that they were likely to potentially shut me down for all the wrong reasons, out of ignorance and fear and not from a position of understanding. This movement has spread all over the world. I'm not sure if there are any DIY biolabs in Portugal yet, but they're definitely in other European countries. Of course, there are laws against genetic engineering without a license in these countries, but these labs are learning to work around that by taking people like myself who have degrees and getting them to take responsibility for what happens in the spaces. So the movement continues to spread, and it's spreading very quickly. This is an example of how these labs might be funded. This was a very successful Kickstarter campaign that just ended yesterday. This is a laboratory in California in the United States. And the United States government has looked at this too, of course, and a presidential commission, at least in 2010, decided that there was no risk and there was the potential for innovation, and so they recommended the technology not be regulated in the United States at this time. This is what the lab looks like. It's very humble. What's kind of cool is it's made mainly of recycled materials. Those are old sliding glass doors and windows. The lab benches are made of stainless steel restaurant counters. And it serves us perfectly well. We serve all ages. We didn't really know who was going to come to the lab when we opened it, but the breadth of people is quite startling. Teachers and students use it to add hands-on to their educational experience. We have inventors and hobbyists, which excites me very much. But we also have artists who are in a unique position because of their place in society to comment on this technology. We teach classes, because when people arrive, a lot of times they don't know anything about it. And part of my goal is to have people immerse themselves in it and do it hands-on. And we have events where the general public can actually come in an evening and analyze some DNA samples. One thing is it's very empowering in that before, the consumer didn't have a way of actually querying certain things, such as what was in their food. And now, with DNA, both reading and writing DNA code becoming cheaper and more accessible, the consumer can actually find out for themselves what's in their food, for example. So we do field work. We also explore the environment that's around us. This is a project we have on a canal that's very polluted within the city of New York. And there was some interest in finding out what sort of microorganisms were living in the canal. And this would not have been possible even 5 years ago for citizens to actually be able to afford and also collaborate with professional scientists to find out more about their environment and their city. And for me, I felt that I really wanted people to not have a reflexive just dislike of the technology because they didn't understand it. And so I like to see parents and children come in, and actually the next generation is going to be much more familiar with this, because in many places, at least in the United States, genetic engineering is part of the biology curriculum. Students do experiments that 20 or 30 years ago would have been Nobel Prize winning. So just like artificial intelligence, it's going to be something that our children will find very familiar, not scary. There are some technologies, though, that are coming down the road that really do beg reflection. And I want to talk a little bit about those, because they even give me a little bit, and I'm all for open science, I'm all for people being able to have the power to change their environment in whatever way they want, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. And I like the idea of people doing genetic engineering on plants or other things. But some of these technologies have such power that the community laboratory that I run has also become a place to inform people and to start discussions about it. Because if we don't start talking about it now, it's happening so quickly that it's just going to, as some of the people were saying in the beginning of this conference, the future is going to run us right over. One of these technologies is called CRISPR, and you may have seen it in the news. It was actually mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. And the technology has already been used by the Chinese to engineer a human embryo. The embryo was non-viable, but still, it was a proof of principle experiment that showed that this technology was just as efficacious on a human embryo as it is in bacteria or plants. As a matter of fact, there are, to this day, at least 20 different species that have been engineered by this technology in the laboratory. This sparked a debate even within the scientific community, and there was a summit. Some scientists felt that there should be a moratorium or a ban. Other scientists thought that there shouldn't be. This is the inventor of the technology at the World Economic Forum. Right now, actually, it's interesting, it's so wrapped up in patents that in terms of actual rolling out in a big way, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because there's a massive patent battle on this. But it's something that has just this amazing potential to cure disease, to maybe enhance people, and also, of course, the dark side of eugenics. The movie Gattaca has flashed up on the screen here. That's one of my favorite movies. I show it to my students frequently. And it's about a society where half is genetic engineered and half aren't. And the genetic engineered people get the good jobs. And I used to think the movie was funny, and I'm not laughing anymore. This is an example of how ubiquitous this technology is already, because we're very good at spreading scientific information. This is the website of a competition for not only college students, but high school students in genetic engineering. And they're offering, as part of the distribution kit, this very technology. And I love the way it says, want to use CRISPR? And it's actually, it's for human cells, this particular, of course, you're only supposed to do it in the lab under supervision, but I mean, wow, okay. So the sorts of people, just high school teams like this, we had a team like this at our community lab. They can use this technology. And that is also going hand in hand with other technologies like MAGE and something called gene drive, which allows anything done by CRISPR to be propagated through a population extremely rapidly. This is something that's being discussed for use in things like malaria, where mosquitoes can be engineered not to contain the malaria virus. But it's kind of a heavy thing where you take an entire population of a species and in a couple of generations change the entire species irreversibly. Because a lot of this isn't like regular genetic engineering. It's very hard to detect this particular type of engineering and then go back and salvage it back out. So we have to think long and hard. I'm going to end with this quote by George because I think it's pretty good. So these technologies will allow us to go where we never imagined we were going to go before, perhaps. And in the future, it will be very easy to move back and forth both to our past and to this unimaginable future. I'm not going to pretend that I think a lot about the future. There are a lot of smarter people here sitting in the front row that think about the future all the time. I just keep up with the technology, but I like to start conversations. And I'm very happy that this conversation is happening here and in this place and in this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Pedro, please take the floor.
Great.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'll speak in English on benefit of Alan as well. And actually, I took advantage of the title of the conference, The Brave New World, and kind of ducted it to associate it to robots. And I will somehow tell you some of the stories of the most recent news in robotics. Of course, picking back in the things that we do in my lab at IST in Lisbon, but also showing some other things in the middle. And I really wanted to underline that, of course, this is a very small sample of things that are being done around the world, and even in Portugal, where there's a lot of groups in robotics and companies as well. So it's really a technological niche. I mean, many people, when you think about robots, probably you think of what you see here. That is robots that operate in factories and they just do repetitive things. I mean, basically what they are doing is again and again the same assembly process, again and again the painting or the soldering, and in some sense they lack intelligence. That is, if you move one thing out of the way or where it was supposed to be, they probably will keep doing the same blindly without caring about whether the thing is there or not. But in fact, these robots made a revolution in productivity, and they are very successful commercially in the last years or decades, I should say. But anyway, the next step, somehow, which is already being traced, is to provide the robots with some kind of intelligence. And I brought here a video that I like a lot, just a small part of it, where somehow it shows how difficult it is, it always was and still is for us, not only to define intelligence, let it alone to somehow make it replicatable by machines. This scarab is pushing this ball, and at some point he has a trouble, and it's an unexpected trouble, and many of us would associate to intelligence the capacity of problem solving, but probably would not expect from such a bug that it is capable of displaying intelligence. However, when you see it moving around trying to find a solution for the problem, you probably get impressed, and at some point he actually even finds a solution, which is the one that maybe all of us would come up with. And the issue is how does he manage to do it? How does he manage to be intelligent in this sense? And this is the question that a lot of us keep asking ourselves when developing robots that we want to provide with intelligence, artificial intelligence, as Manuela was talking about. So a lot of people in robotics actually is searching for inspiration in biology because of examples like this, but many others, in fact. And there's a whole thread of work around the world getting inspiration from swarms of animals. And I'm just going to bring here a small example coming from work that we did with biologists in Lisbon from IGC, which shows some of these ideas. And the inspiration came from the immunological system, the human immunological system. They do models for that, dynamic models of how the system works. And actually that allows us with simulated robots to identify abnormal behaviors out of nothing. I mean, we did not teach them what is abnormal, but we see that the robot there in red is one that is moving always on a straight line while the others are always dispersing. And these are really identified by the model as abnormal. And in fact, the model is robust to normal changes. Here they are all concentrated. They will suddenly change to dispersion. Both are normal behaviors, and the system does not classify them as abnormal. Even though there was a change like before. But you can build up on that example and see that now they are aggregating again, but at some point one of them will go out of one of the clusters, and because it's kind of a singleton, as an outlier, you will see that the system identifies it as abnormal. Here it is. So this is one example of inspiration on biology systems, which actually is very often bilateral. I mean, the biologists also want to do their experiments in the robots because they sometimes cannot do it in animals.
My name is Emmons, and hopefully I'm going to win.
I also brought here an example from another group at IST, from my colleague Anna Paiva, where they are doing actually something completely different. Here, somehow you get inspiration in other disciplines. You can think of psychology, for instance. And the point is a robot that interacts with people. And this robotic head, it does not move more than the head and the eyes, but in fact is capable of lots of interaction. It looks at the people that are playing a game with it. It can say some nasty jokes. It can team up with some of the people and be an opponent of the others. It can give advices. And the way it actually looks at the people with its artificial eyes and the way it detects what is going on and reacts makes it very natural and makes it like an artificial teammate. Here you can see how the cameras on board the robot can identify faces and this way make it look and in fact get a lot of interaction with the people. So somehow, in a sense, we are here trying the other way around of what Elaine was talking about. It's like from the technology, make the robots more humans, in a sense. Another trend that is going on more recently is this of providing robots together with other devices, all networked, so that they can interact with people, for instance, at home. Imagine that someone who's actually sick at home needs help to do a lot of the household tasks, and it can do it in a natural way.
Please send your request.
Switch on the light in the living room.
In this case,
I'm going to switch on the light on the living room.
the person called the robot using a tablet, one of the network devices. The robot came, the robot is networked with the light that is just switched on after talking to the person.
Help me find the cardboard box.
And now he's going to pick up some object that otherwise might be difficult, not for this person to pick, but...
Yes.
Okay, let me just move a little bit faster, if I can, which I cannot. Anyway, that's okay. So it goes, it picks, and so it has to do all this to plan what it's going to do, to recognize the box, then to pick it up, and then navigate again. Several things that actually Manuel also talked about today. And all this makes the robot actually a human companion. I mean, in the sense that at home can carry out several tasks which are of interest and help the human. The robot, together with all the other devices it is networked with. In fact,
please
here,
state your request.
There will be another one you can see.
Open.
I will leave the blinds half open.
There's motorized blinds in the home,
Yes.
and the robot is going to use them. Okay. You can think also of robots, mobile robots, which are networked with themselves, and several of them. In this case, what you have is that the robots are moving information. They have a geometry that they abide by communicating with each other. And in fact, they can even deform that formation when people get into the scene so that they are safe. And you can imagine that there are tasks that several robots can do better than a single robot. So it's interesting also to have these guys moving around, say, patrolling instead of just a single one. But for doing that, they may also have to change dynamically their formations, and that's another challenge. But it actually makes them also look very human in a sense. They can do that dynamically, they can keep changing, they can move from one pattern to another and back to the original one. This is joint work with EPFL in Lausanne from a PhD student, a common PhD student. Okay, so several examples of what robots can do, especially multi-robot systems. But indeed, I think that people, and this is what is at stake here today, build up a lot of expectations from robots, which fortunately some of them are being met over the years, but in fact many of them are not yet being met. And so maybe we should not be so afraid, because there's many things still to be done before we can even think of being afraid. And in fact, some of these things were already suspected by Charlie Chaplin even in the 30s. And it's actually nice, the captions there make some association between the modern times movie scenes and what some of the problems that still today roboticists face with real robots. So this machine is supposed to be a robot, so it first has to be calibrated to make sure that it gives food to the right place to the human. But in fact, it starts more or less nicely, maybe not too compliant. But as time goes by, and I had to make some cuts, you'll see that sometimes things go wrong. In fact, there was a calibration problem. I mean, a lot of us roboticists face these kind of issues all the time. And then strange things happen and people cannot understand, because they would expect the robots to behave more like the ones in the movies. But things can go even more wrong if we don't have the right sensors, and sensors are essential in the robots. So if perception goes wrong, things can really go wrong. But there's even worse to happen. The machine can actually get out of hands and actually starting doing things which are not that pleasant and get out of control, even if it's working okay, but if we are not careful enough about, say, the norms of behavior that humans abide by. And so that's why some people, and we in particular, have been in more recent years working on interactions with other types of sciences as well, social sciences. In fact, we did some work with mathematicians, computer scientists, and the philosopher of science in the last about 7 years on building what we call institutional robots. These are robots that in a collective use institutions as artifacts to mediate their interactions. And an example of institution you might not expect, but which is a typical example for us, is a roundabout, which has a physical property, that is, if the vehicles get near to it, they have to avoid it. But it also needs the so-called mental property. You need to decide a norm to go over the roundabout on the right or on the left, otherwise it's very messy in terms of traffic. So these kind of norms, of course, for these and more sophisticated institutions are interesting, because not only building up them in collectives can help the collectives to behave in a more intelligent and systematic way, but in fact, if we use the ones similar to humans, we can have the collectives interacting better and more normally, regularly with humans. I actually just want to leave you with a video that I think speaks for itself, without saying too many more words, of a project that we are working on, an European project that we coordinate at IST. It is called Monarch. The actual robot that you saw already in the video about the formations, I think it's also wandering around here in Casa da Música today. It's called M-Bot or Gasparzinho, depending on the nickname. In this project, robots interact with children in hospitals. So the questions of institutional norms are also prominent. We need to be careful about what we do. We need the same robots to behave in different ways if they are teaching, helping teaching, or playing a game with the kids. And you can see how, in this case, technology helps the life of these kids who are in the pediatric ward of an oncological hospital, and how actually they are so nice and well received by the kids in a natural way, as the mother of one of them says in the end. So I hope this leaves with a nice message, and I'll leave you with the video and with some of the comments. It's a short thing.
robô é um robô cuja única função é interagir socialmente com as pessoas. É um projeto europeu que envolve o Instituto Superior Técnico, que coordena, e mais, neste momento, oito instituições portuguesas e europeias. O consórcio idealiza o robô, que depois é construído pela empresa. Neste caso, a IDMind e a Softec nos ajudam imenso a concretizar isto. Digamos, toda a parte de tecnologia, materiais, vem, digamos, da criatividade das nossas empresas. Como diz, é uma ligação muito interessante entre a academia e o mundo empresarial.
Tudo o que é lúdico é terapêutico. Pronto, não terapêutico no sentido direto, mas terapêutico no sentido do envolvimento, de uma melhor qualidade de vida, de um melhor estar, de um mais.
Hoje já senti evolução, porque ele hoje já sorri, já pisca os olhos, já acho que está comandado para não passar de certo sítio, porque ainda não o vi passar para o lado de cá, e portanto pisca umas luzes verdes que também não piscava, portanto está mais alegre do que o que estava. E a minha Sofia ainda não o largou. Acho que é uma iniciativa interessante, principalmente na época em que vivemos, que a robótica e a eletrónica dominam o mundo das nossas crianças. Desde que seja utilizada de uma forma positiva, eu acho interessante. Para eles isto tudo acaba por ser um pouco natural. Para nós é que é assim muito inovador, mas para eles acho que estas coisas já vão sendo naturais. E acho ótimo o nosso país estar a participar num projeto destes.
Okay. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Pedro. You both gave a lot for all of us to think about, and thank you also for abiding to the scheduled time. That final note was a very nice and positive one, which will make my work easier along the line. This conversation is about the future of mankind and about improvements to our daily life. And in that, we have to reference transhumanism. Transhumanism is, in its simpler sense, the philosophy that advocates the improvement of human life by means of technology. And now it is possible to foresee that in less than 50 years, we'll be able to eradicate most, if not all, diseases, extend our lifespan to hundreds of years, and merge with computers in order to achieve greater knowledge and a new degree of intelligence which is now impossible to imagine. The choices we make now will matter a lot in the future. So let's discuss the prospects for the future. One of the main concerns of all this is how we'll make sure that there are no abuses and no wrongdoings. Alan, I gather your answer to this goes along the lines of the work you have been doing, empowering people through education. Am I right? Do you believe that an informed society will take better decisions?
I hope so. I guess if you look at the debate that happened before our session, I'm sort of on the side of letting everything go out, letting the knowledge go out, letting the technology go out, and eventually the good guys will win. It may look a little dystopic in the beginning, but I think eventually the good guys will win. Not that there are necessarily bad guys out there, but it's a dual-edged technology. All of these technologies are dual use. So I think, actually, I speak a lot with the biosecurity community, and their attitude is what they call a culture of shared responsibility. So they try to get people to get together and agree that we all should be responsible as a world community for the stewardship of some of these technologies, because they realize, particularly in the case of biology, it's impossible to control it. It's not like you can take, like nuclear power, you can take the uranium and hide it somewhere or control it. Biology is everywhere.
So how do we get to that level of knowledge in order to take better decisions?
Well, I think people should, I'd like to see everybody have the same working knowledge of biotechnology as they have of electricity. You don't have to know exactly how it works, but you know enough so that you can use it day to day and understand it and understand what's dangerous about electricity, what isn't dangerous, how you can use it safely.
Great. Pedro, you've shown us machines that work together to make our lives easier. They were obviously programmed by humans, and they were designed to be benign, to do good. We can, and we do, with the same effort, program machines to do harm. When artificial intelligence gets to the point when they will be able to program themselves, will they be good to humans?
Well, the first point is whether they will get to that stage, right? I mean, because it might, of course, be dangerous, but I think that applies to all technology all the time. I mean, when you develop technology, usually, and if you are a researcher, you dream of doing better, say, in this case, better machines. And you, of course, must be aware of all the risks as well. But it's true that even when you are aware and you are careful, someone can just pick it up and do something wrong that you were not thinking of. In that case, I think it's both that, but also that it's even a philosophical question whether we'll get to a point where that really can happen. That the machines become so intelligent that they can program themselves, and even worse, to do harm to us, because somehow, even to reach that point, they were programmed not to be harmful. But of course, there are risks, as in every other technology.
My question was more along the lines of building the symbiotic relationship between machines and humans. Will we be able to teach machines empathy?
Oh, that I would say that it's somehow already happening. Actually, one of the robots I showed there from my colleague in Lisbon tries to show some empathy to the humans. Of course, through external signs, the way it looks at the humans, the fact that it pays attention, and then the jokes, we didn't go through that in detail, but that it says, and so somehow it's being programmed to create empathy. You can say that it's still very artificial, but I mean, it's very often the case that if you look back even 5 years, and if you would think at that time that a robot could do something like that, you would say it was science fiction. Then it becomes natural and you want something else. But in fact, there are good steps traced in that direction, I think.
That's another point I would like to question you both on it. You feel that the speed of knowledge we've been acquiring is increasing greatly or not? We're learning faster to do bigger things, most meaningful things?
Well, all technologies build on what's gone before, and now there's more and more that's gone before. And so things are happening faster and faster. The curve is starting to go like this. And in biology, there's still a lot we have to learn. I think it's interesting that you asked him about the robots getting away rather than genetically engineered creations getting away, because people
we'll get to that.
Are okay. I think people are inherently more scared of the biological things because there's still a lot of it is still a black box, whereas a robot, you're building it, and so you feel that you know it because you created it, which may be a false sense of security. But, oops, I lost the point. Well,
our knowledge has been getting quicker.
Yeah, so you can't really predict what you're going to discover in nature, and so this discovery of this gene editing system that's relatively simple and inexpensive came out of nowhere. It was a system that bacteria had that we didn't even know they had. And then once it was discovered, it took a while for people to realize the implications. But now it's taking off like a rocket. So discovery like that just can't be predicted.
The same in robotics?
Yeah, and in fact, when I heard your question, I was thinking of some of the developments in recent years come from the fact that technology developed, especially electronics and so on, and made possible the implementation of ideas that were already out there but could not really bloom. I mean, especially in AI because of the complexity of the algorithms and so on. And so it's true. That's why sometimes it looks like things are moving fast. They are, because there are some core developments that help them moving fast. And yeah, in that sense, they probably will continue like that, at least for a while.
Okay. We have to talk about ethics. Alan, pretty soon genomics will allow us to end most diseases. Is there any reason why we should not do it if we can?
I think one of the big problems that our children are going to face is what to do with all these people. Because the Earth sort of had its own forms of birth control. I love the phrase primordial indifference. That's what I feel when I go places like Alaska, where I feel like I'm a little speck on the landscape, and the landscape doesn't care if I live or die. But we've surrounded ourselves with cities and technologies, and now these medical breakthroughs that are going to allow us to preserve ourselves much better than we ever did in the past. And if that doesn't go hand in hand with some attempt to curtail the explosion of the population, we're going to come to a crisis point if we haven't passed it already. So there's a good side to that and a bad side, and I'm not sure what we're going to do about that. It's going to be an interesting problem.
Yeah, but if we can and have the means to make our sons and daughters' lives disease-free, shouldn't we do it?
Well, certainly on a personal note, I would say absolutely yes. But as a scientist, I look at the balance as a whole, and I wonder, just like it would be great to have an endangered species that we wiped out, like the passenger pigeonback, but its natural environment is gone. We bring it back, where does it go? It's very, very interesting.
It is. Pedro, if you can enhance our lives by implanting machines, what is the ethics behind that? Should we do it? Should we not?
Doing what with the machines?
If we can enhance our lives, improve our lives.
Yeah, I think somehow my answer goes along the same lines, because I'm optimistic regarding what we can do with technology, and it has been like that over the centuries. But that does not mean that we should not be careful, and maybe sometimes think carefully if something in terms of, globally, not just for our own interests as researchers or even personal interests, there's no doubt that it's going wrong. Maybe we should refrain ourselves from enhancing it in that negative side. But I would say that in general, I think we should always be free to continue our quest for, improving, making more intelligent machines, smarter machines, because that is actually the enthusiasm that moves society and humans, right? But always, of course, being careful about what we are doing, and always having some feedback, not just doing it open loop and let it go, and God help us if something goes wrong, because maybe that's not the best approach.
And where do you apply that also? That's the other question. So, for example, I teach a class in an art school, and we talk about the implications of the technology. And I ask the class that question: if you could have one enhancement or one thing, number one, would you do it? And number two, what would it be? And some of the kids were like, yeah, I want wings right away. And some of them said, no, I would not do it. I just don't think it's natural. And interestingly, there was a girl in the class who half of her face was immobile. She had had some disease that had paralyzed half of her face. And I expected her to address that, and she did. But what she said was, this is part of me. This is what makes me unique. I don't want to change it. So if there's something that happens at birth, do we change that person as an embryo or as a small baby without their consent? Do we let them grow to a point and then ask them to make a choice? Just so many questions that will come up now that the technology is starting to be actualized, and we've got to start thinking about them now.
That's a bit like in every technology, there are the early adopters and the late adopters. Mm-hmm. And everybody tends to adopt it because they see the benefits, things we have today, like the internet. Even people that haven't used the internet are now adopting it when they can, because they have the means to do it and they see the advantage in doing it.
Well, we're being forced to do it also. I mean, certain things you can't apply to a college without doing it online now. I mean,
of course.
It's not a choice anymore.
Yeah, yes.
And if some people begin enhancing themselves, won't everybody have to do it to compete?
Well, that's Gattaca. I don't know. It depends on how society views it and a lot of other complicated things.
It's an interesting thing you both said earlier, because when we read about these changes and these promises, we get that ambivalent feeling you both mentioned. I also get it because I get really excited on a personal level. I mean, disease is free. Who doesn't want to be disease is free? But on a community level, I get worried, and you both are worried about it. How will we be able to make all these changes available to all mankind, or even in a country, to every class, as we've seen in the earlier conversation? Today we cannot feed everyone on the planet. How can we make these changes available?
Well, I think technology always goes from the top to the bottom. So if you think of a cell phone, who had the first cell phones? It wasn't everybody. It was people that had a lot of money and had a cool piece of technology. And in a sense, that system works because the development of the technology is funded by the elite for a purpose. And then it eventually trickles down. I think that system works fairly well, that it trickles down to the rest of us. I mean, our standard of living, as David was saying, is much better today than it ever was before. Every house has some sort of connection to something, whether it's a television set or a smartphone or whatever. So I think the same thing will happen with biomedical advances, and the development of the technology is always funded by the 1%.
But you have another problem there. On a global sense, when you're doing research, if we can do it, if you can study it, someone will, as you said it earlier. How will the competition work between countries, mentioning that we are not all democratic countries?
It's very interesting. I don't know. If you look at what's going on in China, that's probably the most alarming because they're very technologically advanced, and yet their whole system of thinking about this seems to be full speed ahead. So you get areas like Europe where Europe may be going, oh no, let's sit back, and China is just running over everybody like a steamroller, engineering humans, going after. Do you know how old the person was who was in charge of that project to determine the genetic basis of intelligence? 19. The average age of the workers at the Beijing Genomics Institute is very, very young. And I see in those people the same kids that come to some of my classes, and they're universally for it because I don't think they've lived long enough to really maybe see the implications of it and worry as much. They're still engaged with enamored with the technology, and maybe they're not as interested in discussing the eventual ramifications.
At the same time, they are working on changes that will affect them personally and directly, because if they're 19 and 20 years old, they'll be able to change much of their future lives.
And they see it, as we were talking about, very personally. They say, of course I want a smarter child. Of course I want a child that has no disease.
Pedro, how's the scenario in robotics and artificial intelligence?
I think that one issue which is maybe a little bit orthogonal to what we will be talking about is that I really think that researchers, and in technology this is especially important, must really somehow not get lost in their own work and keep thinking about it in a, let's say, social or even political way. And I mean, somehow being always aware of the implications, educating the citizens in the sense, I'm not taking kind of a, you know, an elite type of approach. It's more like explaining people how things work so that they can take their own decisions, even influence the politicians to take the decisions in an informed way, so that indeed people know when they want to look at the technology and either put barriers or use it, know what we are talking about. And so it's not just that we keep developing because we like it, or sometimes some of us are ethically correct and so we think when we stop. It's really to kind of provide people with the ability to also take these decisions and and be knowledgeable of what's going on. And of course, in robotics, for the same reason somehow, these very high-level reasons, the same happens. I mean, if tomorrow we will be able to have robots at our homes, basically the problem is similar but much harder than what happened with computers. I mean, when you would just have to type a few words in your keyboard, that would be difficult for lay citizens because they don't really have to learn computer programming or whatever. But if you have Windows and a mouse, it's much easier. With the robots, we are trying to do something similar. What happens is that the fact there's physical interaction makes things much harder. As you saw in Chaplin's movie, the perception is the problem. But if they make it to our homes and become like normal companions, of course people should also be aware of what's going on, what they can expect, what are the risks, and understand how far the technology can go in that particular aspect, in that example.
Okay. Is there a lot of PR in the public relations in the robotics industry? Because I noticed in your film you used words like formation and very military words to describe the way the robots, and I was kind of like this.
Well, maybe sometimes we don't care too much, and we should, but there's a lot of PR, in fact. I mean, I personally would not like to see that association, and it never came to my mind in that sense. Now that you're telling me, I'll think about it in the future. But there's a lot of PR, actually. Robotics is usually very popular, very sexy. People like to go and see, and we try to convey messages in the right way. But it's true, it's not the first time I've heard people from other sciences telling the same you just told me about other words that we use that are always very anthropologic as well, with the way we refer, like the informations, the leader and the follower. It's also something that we say a lot. But there's a lot of PR. Maybe we are not careful enough.
Pedro, in an earlier response, you finished with the sentence, "Thank God." God is mostly absent of the science fiction scenarios. Will it be absent of our future?
Oh my God.
You go first. Well, I know that Craig Venter got into a lot of trouble. For those of you who may not know, it's a scientist who was credited with creating artificial life. What he did was actually a little bit more mundane. He synthesized on a machine the first complete genome of a bacteria. And of course, he had to boot it up. He had to load it into a living bacteria in order to get it to reproduce for the first time. But after that, and of course, he wrote his name in it and all this other stuff. But he was very famous for going on American television and saying he didn't believe in God. Now, Einstein said God does not play dice. I mean, you're going to find all different viewpoints within the sciences. I think there's still a place for God. I'm not sure where it is, but some scientists definitely feel very strongly and find it, and other scientists like Stephen Hawking, I believe, said something like it's life after death was a story for children or something like that. Yeah, there's a famous quote.
Yeah.
So just like any other people, you're going to find that gamut in science. I mean, I'm actually fascinated by how the processes happen. So for instance, evolution. The process of evolution itself is incredible.
Which underlines all this conversation.
Right. Where did that process come from?
In fact, the more you know about it, I think I'll take an agnostic view here somehow, but the more you understand about things from science, somehow, of course, you probably stop believing in kind of things that would make you afraid of what you don't know. But on the other hand, then you get marveled by how nature is actually, or how it is possible that we think about ourselves and develop, let's say, robots which ultimately start thinking and being intelligent. And I mean, how as a species that evolved in some kind of natural way, we were able to do that. And some people credit that to some God also. So I think it will continue there in different ways, one way or another.
Okay, we have two questions from students. The first one will be to you, Alan. Can artificial intelligence and artificial means of acquiring and developing intelligence be confounded, be mixed with natural intelligence, or what we now perceive as natural intelligence, and the natural means of acquiring intelligence?
I think the big question is, how do you define intelligence? What is intelligence? That's what's a little disturbing about the Chinese experiment, is they were basing intelligence on, I believe, the Wessler Adult Intelligence Scale, which is a widely accepted test. But talk to an artist about what intelligence is. Talk to a psychologist about emotional intelligence. These things are just as important. So I think a blending of characteristics in humans is what makes us marvelous.
Okay, Pedro, to you, can artificial intelligence limit spontaneity and creativity, which are now a fundamental part of human life?
Well, easy question. Not certainly to their developers, because they keep being creative. Well, again, I think I would take the positive side. It may, in some aspects, where the machines do what people might try to do in some way, but it will open doors for others. I mean, a different example. Imagine computer graphics. Can you see the incredible movies that people do these days with these kind of tools? And still, there's a lot of creativity there, maybe even more than with the real characters in the past. It's not that I like that all the movies would be like that in the future, but still, I mean, I think it always opens doors, so I would be positive that yes.
Wait till you see the organisms we're going to create.
So if I can take a claim of this conversation, is that we need to educate in order to regulate and discuss and be really aware of the future we are facing, because there are many things happening in many places all over the world, and we have to be really aware. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you.
I'm switching to Portuguese right now para pedir e convidar todas as pessoas a almoçarem connosco no parque de estacionamento da Casa da Música. Há um almoço preparado para todos os presentes, portanto, poderemos nos encontrar lá embaixo. Obrigado. Thank you again.
Obrigada.